The views presented in this program are not meant to express the specific views of the S3EP Bible Fellowship. You are listening to the Vigilance Radio Network.
All right. Hello, everyone. Welcome to a special edition of Culture Insanity during a crazy time. So we're all quarantined. We're all held up in our homes, and so our Vigilance Radio Network thought it'd be a good idea to start giving you guys something to watch other than the latest stand-up special on Netflix or whatever Disney Plus is throwing up because people can't go to the movie theaters, which is awesome, by the way.
Yeah. Although it's still $20 to watch.
For a movie, like a new movie?
For a new movie. They're like putting movies out immediately, but it's $20. But I mean, it's a reasonable price if you consider that the price of 2 tickets is less than $20.
It's not a reasonable price if you have a Regal Unlimited pass.
Well, thankfully Regal Unlimited suspended their payments, so.
Yeah. But anyways, so we're here doing a special arc, if you will, of the podcast just because, people are obviously going to be consuming some stuff, and so we thought we'd give them something what we hope to be worthwhile to consume. So we're going to have just a little short cast here, talking about one thing and seeing where it takes us. And obviously what's happening in the news is, the same kind of stuff that was happening last time we met, which was last Saturday. So coronavirus, and that's why we're here. That's why we're held up. So yeah, thanks for tuning in, and I hope you guys can consume this even in the future. So
make sure you guys, producer Jasmine started a watch party, so make sure you join the watch party, and she'll be monitoring those threads if you want to comment. But you can comment on the live video too, as normal. Yeah.
So what we are going to talk about today is related to coronavirus, as I said. So Evangeline Lilly, who you might know as Kate from Lost, for those of you that were watching TV circa 2006 or something.
Yeah.
Or she's the Wasp in Ant-Man and the Wasp. What else is she in? Mm-hmm.
She's one of the elves, right?
Oh, yeah.
In the Hobbit trilogy.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, she's really cool. Anyway, so she was in the news because of acting against the
establishment,
the status quo. So she is refusing to self-isolate, self-quarantine, whatever term you want to use, hold up.
Self-shelter.
Shelter in place.
Shelter in place, yeah.
Yeah, she refused to do that because she's downplaying the seriousness of coronavirus.
So they say,
allegedly. So yeah, she tweeted something or posted something that she was, on her way to drop her kids off at gymnastics class or something like that. Basically just being out and about and, business as usual type stuff for her and in her life. And she obviously got a lot of backlash from that, A lot of people commenting on her post, I was a fan, but now I'm not, which is ridiculous, by the way.
Yeah.
As if these people can't separate her work versus her, personal views, and it's silly like that. But so she got a lot of backlash from that, and she responded with this. She said, "There's something every election year," implying that this is all tied to some sort of ploy by this side or that side to gain or lose, support. And she said, where we are right now feels a lot too close to martial law for my comfort. Let's be vigilant right now, keeping a close eye on our leaders, making sure that they don't abuse this moment to steal away more freedoms and grab more power. So that's what we're here to talk about now. How does this coronavirus speak into that, and how should we be viewing that, especially as Christians? Should we be fearful, and should we be forsaking, gathering of believers, and like, what does that look like? How can that look? And all these
Well,
things.
that's the big deal, right?
Mm-hmm.
Is like for us as pastors, what we're constantly being faced with in our congregation, and as I talk to other pastors, this is the case too, is, the gathering of believers, which is an ancient tradition that predates long before America or any of the modern societies that we have, and it's a command, is being seen as a non-essential gathering.
Right. Which is, I just read this morning, just before we went live, New York, to put it into perspective, it's seen as a non-essential gathering. New York just, maybe it was the mayor of New York, I can't remember his name. I think he said that liquor stores are seen as essential, and so they'll stay open.
Yeah.
So put that into perspective. We're keeping liquor stores open, but certain of our leaders and, authorities and politicians are saying that the gathering and, where you go for spiritual guidance is seen as non-essential. What did Kate Brown say a couple days ago?
Oh, yeah.
She said something in pertaining to that. I'm trying to find it right now, but let's see, where is it? James posted it somewhere.
Right, Pastor James posted it.
Yeah.
But she was basically affirming that position.
Oh, I got it. It right here. She says, "I understand this is a hardship for many families," Kate Brown said. Kate Brown's the governor of Oregon, for those, of you that are tuning in from Oregon. "I urge Oregonians to comply with the spirit of recommendations and to offer ways online and in smaller groups for Oregonians to get the spiritual guidance they need." Which isn't altogether bad advice, and we're fortunate enough, at least here, that we do that, and we're set up to do that.
Right.
But she is encouraging, the isolation, the total isolation of it, and so that's the bigger question. How should we be treating that for our friends and partners in other churches? They're not set up like we are. They're not set up to be online. They're not set up to stream. They're not set up to do things like we're doing right now, give their congregations or whatever something to consume that, is relevant for their faith and stuff. And so what does that mean for them? They just don't see each other. They don't talk. They don't, they don't gather together. They don't worship. Any number of things for the next till August or whenever,
I think
what you read, this goes to August, September, October. This is 2 weeks. This is 12.
I don't know how stringent Kate Brown is in her belief system. She's stated before, back in 2018, she stated that each of us has a spirit living within us, and she was talking about yoga and meditation as being, in her life. She clarified that she didn't see being a yogi, which she said means someone who practices yoga in religious terms. So she's spiritual in nature, but basically that ideology says that everything's an illusion. Mm-hmm. There's nothing super significant. Everything's an illusion. In fact, you want to get rid of the distinctions. So, okay. If that's, and so she's spiritual. On the other side, you have the naturalistic beliefs that believe that nothing is significant because everything is just sort of going through, constant permutation, with, time and chance. So, it is what it is. There's nothing you can do about it.
So is there a hard stance? Is there a hard stance that a believer should be taking? Where do you draw the line in regards to this coronavirus type thing? As we know, it's a fluid situation, and people will, are encouraged to act on their convictions. That's what we're telling our congregation, for example, as far as Sunday service and stuff. We're not going to turn you away. We encourage,
But we're telling you not to come.
We're telling you not to come, but if you show up, we're not going to say, get out of here. There's a difference. But
our congregation's also small enough that it doesn't, that we easily still fit under the 25 if people, for the most part, respect it.
And as I mentioned, our congregation's small enough, and we've been doing things a certain way long enough to where, in fact, we just talked about it last week or earlier this week, that we're encouraged that our congregation is still gathering, digitally. if you will.
Because we've been doing that for a long time. The VRN is a part of that.
So we're blessed in that way. But is there a hard line that a believer should draw? Like, I respect this whole thing. I respect the coronavirus. I'm trying to respect what my government has to say. But what? Like, is there a hard line there? Like,
yeah, I think there is. I think that the hard line that should be drawn is on the spreading of the gospel, which we're not inhibited from, right? So nobody's telling us that we can't spread the gospel. In fact, they're encouraging us to spread the gospel online and digitally. That's a valid format. It would be the closest thing to first century church doing that would be you can't write letters. We're not being told that. In fact, we're being encouraged to do that. The thing is that the church has been so reticent to be at the front of technology that most of the churches, unless you're a big church, they don't think in those terms.
Yeah.
And so we're a small church and we have all of our gear set up to do that. And we already do that naturally. So it's not a big deal for us. But I know lots of pastors who,
they're in crisis right now.
Yeah, they're in crisis in terms of, because that is basically the one thing that they do on a regular basis, and they haven't thought that their church hasn't thought that through, and so yeah, they're in crisis. But I would say not being allowed to spread the gospel, not being allowed to minister to each other, but even the shelter in place in Oregon states you can minister to relatives, like people, like health issues and so on and so forth. You're allowed to do that. Now, I'm not sure how far that goes in terms of clergy, and whether like clergy is allowed to do that. I know that in Britain, I think it was Britain, I was just reading that 2 members of the Roman Catholic clergy got cited for performing a funeral.
Oh, interesting.
I would say that if we were told we can't perform funerals, that we should. I would say that kind of crosses the line. So I don't know. But what I can tell you is we're not there yet.
Yeah. So what do we think about what she's saying here? Like, and how discerning should we be? She's suggesting that
Evangeline Lilly, you mean?
Yes.
Yeah.
In regards to the article, she's suggesting that we're not far away from martial law, which for those of you who don't know what martial law is the imposing of military might in regards to an emergency of some kind, and it specifically takes away certain liberties and freedoms that we have as people, as Americans, and so kind of hits it right on the nose. Like, we're in a temporary emergency crisis with this coronavirus pandemic. Recently, I think it was yesterday or the day before, something, our government, roped in a couple thousand National Guard troops to aid in the spread of coronavirus.
Aid in stopping the spread of coronavirus. Yeah.
We're being told in California, coming up here potentially in Oregon, in I think Pennsylvania, in New York, we're being told to shelter in place for a minimum of 2 weeks, and any non-essential people that are caught, I say caught, but non-essential people that are out and about or, negating that decree or that order could face a penalty. Like, if you look at the California
they'll be cited.
Penal code,
Yeah.
you could be cited for $1,000+ or up to 6 months in jail.
Right.
So, there's a penalty attached to it, for disobeying, a direct decree from your authorities.
Yeah.
So, people that, are being discerning would say, and realistic, I guess, would be yeah, that kind of does sound a lot like martial law. How far will this go, though, is the thing. And I'm really, I'm really hesitant to be, to push the fear-mongering, and I don't like it, so I take it in, and I keep an eye on it, but I don't know. What are your thoughts? And I'll get Pastor Monty on the phone here, because I know he'll have something to say about this.
I got 3 things to say. I posted a link into the stream for Martial Law, the TV show, starring Sammo Hung. You should check it out. 1998 to 2000. Check that out. Secondly, the line that, just to finish the discussion from earlier, the line that I would say needs to be drawn is in the spreading of the gospel and then in the ministering to people. So like if there's people who are sick and so on and so forth, we should be ministering to those people, and those things should continue. And if we're told that we can't, then what are we saving ourselves for? So there's that.
In other words, like, what's the point of the way we live if we can't do those two things? Those two things are like foundational for our faith and how we live after we accept Christ. So
so
we're told stop.
So those two things, I would say, we need to be able to take care of people, and we need to be able to share our faith. When those don't work, then we're gonna need to be thinking differently. Although I will say that there is places in Scripture that talk specifically about quarantining. There are.
Like someone with leprosy.
Like with leprosy.
You get them out.
Yeah. But the pastors in specific are called, for instance, to go to the sick, right? So there's an idea there that the sick are not in the place with the congregation.
Yeah.
And Jesus himself reached out, to the lepers and so on and so forth, right?
Yeah.
So in a lot of our social services, they come from that mentality where nobody else would go in and minister to people. The Christians would.
The thing in this wording of these, mandates from, our governor or another governor, it's so probably intentionally vague.
It's great euphemisms.
But when they say essential this or essential that, that's 100% relative.
Well, I love shelter in place. I mean, it's quarantine.
Yeah.
But they're calling it shelter in place, and
it sounds nicer.
I love the wordsmithing of it.
Oh yeah,
it's fun.
It's to
the other day I was
prevent more hysteria, which let's not kid ourselves. We're past the point of hysteria.
Right. The other day I was listening to
Damage
Trump.
Control.
Trump was talking, and he was talking about this time period, and he was talking about how social distancing. He made a quip about social distancing as this new term, and it's tremendous term or whatever.
Tremendous.
But but he was talking about this new term, and then he was talking about how there's these new phrases that keep popping up, useful terms, very useful.
That's hilarious.
But then he was saying that he doesn't know if he came up with the term fake news, but he wishes that he hadn't, and he's pretty sure he did.
You certainly made it popular. Certainly put it on the map.
But anyway, sorry. At the third point, what was the third point? Oh, Evangeline Lilly. Yeah, back to the actual topic.
The martial law thing. I'm going to get past.
You're getting past your dad. Okay, Pastor Monty. So, but Evangeline Lilly, I think she makes a decent point. I think our eyes do need to be open. I think we're in danger of being Palpatined.
Interesting. Hey, Pastor, how are you?
I'm good.
So you've been tuning in, yeah?
Oh yeah.
So martial law. Well, this actress here suggests that we're a step away from it, or we're walking right up to that line in regards to how we're treating this whole thing. What would you say in regards to this martial law and how it relates to how we should be discerning as believers and as Americans?
Well, first of all, I sent a comment in regarding martial law that
on the video.
On the chat, he said, willing to bet she has never actually lived under martial law. I have. She doesn't know what she's talking about.
Maybe have grandparents or something. But yeah,
that's essentially it. She. I doubt seriously she's actually lived under martial law. It's very interesting. But
martial law has taken weird forms, right? And it's hidden. It's been hidden under the guise of different things over the decades and centuries. Would you agree?
Well, okay. Let's put it in context. Martial law is a legal terminology that ascribes to the government in power the ability to utilize the military in order to control what happens and doesn't happen in regard to the citizenry. So it is specifically, and by the way, it is inside of our Constitution that the government can institute martial law if the Republic is in jeopardy. And this is what happened when President Marcos of the Philippines instituted martial law. So I lived in the Philippines as a missionary during the time that martial law was in place. More importantly, my wife grew up under martial law in the Philippines.
So I guess what I was saying was, like, in regards to martial law is hidden under the guise. When I said that, like, it's been not so overt, but so, like, maybe it's better if I just give an example. So, like, during World War II, FDR, passed a whatever that we can basically search out and detain any Japanese American in fear that they could be, a traitor to their country or something. Is that accurate? Like, we detained a lot of Japanese Americans?
No, that's not martial law. That's a whole different thing, and he wasn't challenged legally, but he was in violation of the Constitution when he made that action.
So it's not technically martial law, but that's not what's being. I think the spirit of what Evangeline Lilly is saying is that a totalitarian government system is that we're in danger of a totalitarian government, taking control.
What she's doing, Josh, in my opinion, what she's doing is she's exhibiting the two key elements that millennials exist.
She's not a millennial, for the record.
Well, but she's exhibiting those things nonetheless.
She's like 41.
Arrogance and ignorance.
Why? I don't understand. Why do you say that?
Yeah.
Why do you there's a certain irony to saying arrogance and ignorance about another person's position that you don't really know why they have that?
Well, because she hasn't lived under martial law. And she doesn't understand, first of all, the terminology she's throwing around.
But that's not the point.
From that point, that's ignorance.
No, that's not the point. The point, when you're talking about martial law, is that a totalitarian government is able to rise up out of a free-thinking government. And that is what that would be.
We are not a totalitarian government.
That's the point.
We're not even close to it.
But that's the point. The point is that we're not a totalitarian government, and she's concerned that that's what could happen.
What happens under martial law, Josh?
You're caring about the term martial law.
Military.
You're talking about the term martial law. That's forget the definitional term of martial law. Any point where the government has unilateral control is martial law. So whether you have a dictator that the term isn't technically martial law, but it's still a dictator who has totalitarian control. It is in effect martial law. That's the point she's making. She's not saying technical martial law. She's talking about in effect, in actuality, it is the same outcome as if we had martial law.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, she's speaking out of ignorance. The reality of it is we're not even close to anything like that. What the administration is seeking to do is to give guidance. First of all, it's not the president of the United States who is making any type of unilateral decision as to how people can exercise their freedom or not.
That's not what's being said.
No. Don't do the yet thing.
But that's not what's...
Clearly, this is because of a misunderstanding of how it is that our government operates by many.
No, that's not what's being said. That's not what's being said. When Julius Caesar became the supreme emperor of Rome, that power was given to him. When Adolf Hitler became the supreme chancellor of Germany, that power was given to him. When Emperor Palpatine became the galactic empire emperor of the Galactic Senate, that power was given to him.
None of them are set up with three separate branches of government co-equal and cooperating as the United States is as a republic. So your illustrations for all three of those that you just give are invalidated.
You know that's not true, right? You know that's not true. Like the Roman Empire, our government's based on the Roman Empire.
Elements, but not all.
Well, yeah, it's not exactly the same, but
Josh, the reality of it is that we are not even close to anything like that. What is happening currently is that governors, you're welcome to disagree, but your disagreement doesn't make it any truer or less. The reality of it is there's a couple of things happening here.
Likewise, Pastor, right?
It is the governors of each state who have responsibility to direct the citizenry of each state. The federal government does not dictate to them what they have to do. What happens is each governor makes independent choices. So, like,
who calls in the National Guard?
Yeah,
the governors.
And once they call in so let's say that they do. Once they call in the National Guard, then who decides what those troops do?
The governor.
No.
National Guard is under the governors of each state.
They're used by the Fed.
No. The National Guard is called in by the governors of each state and is under the authority of the governors of each state.
But in a time of crisis,
disagreement between the local city municipality and the governors.
We understand that there's...
You have de Blasio in New York dictating that he wants people to do certain things.
We understand that there's a difference between the federal and the state. That's not what's in question.
And the governor, Cuomo, is saying, no, you can't do that.
We understand that there's a difference between the federal and the state. What we're talking about is that under certain circumstances, the federal has the right to impose upon the state what it wants to. That's martial law.
That's not even happening. The imposition
but you would agree that's true, right? That assessment's true.
That's what the Constitution allows.
Okay, so good. So we can start there. So that
Josh, what that is backed up by is military.
I just looked it up. You're right about the fact that state officials can implement the National Guard as they see fit, but the president can activate the National Guard and place it under federal
That's
control.
what I just said. I said it was the Fed.
Okay, that's different than what's being asserted.
So
no, it's not.
You say, Pastor. Let me.
And
I know you don't like the what ifs and the yets.
It's truth time with Pastor Monty. I know what I'm.
I know you.
This isn't truth time. This is culture insanity.
I know you don't like the what ifs and the yets, but you also would agree that it's important to be discerning and to keep a close eye on things. Correct. So let me give you a hypothetical.
We're not even close.
So when you say we're not even close,
asserted by this woman,
I don't even know how you could say that. So here's a realistic scenario.
Here's how I can say.
Hold on. I'm talking. Hold on, please. Here's a realistic scenario. So the National Guard was called in to aid the spread of coronavirus, and that's
to aid in stopping the spread of coronavirus.
So when they when they come up with a vaccine. A realistic scenario would be every American is told to get the vaccine or else. And what happens if the National Guard starts knocking on all of our doors and saying, take this vaccine, you need to, or else?
Oh, my goodness, Adam, that is so much over the top.
But how is that over the top? Kids are told that they're not even allowed to go to school unless they've been vaccinated.
It's true. For flu.
You're acting like that's so out of the realm of possibility.
For flu. And there are states that are trying to pass laws in terms of anti-vaxxers.
Government, it is under our present governmental system.
What we're talking about is when the present government
simply wouldn't.
What we're talking about is the possibility. And for the record, I think you're assuming that Adam and I agree with Evangeline Lilly. And what we're talking about, we're not agreeing with her. We're just understanding that there's a certain reasonability to it. The way that you're talking, the way that you're talking about it is as if she's completely ignorant and there's no possibility for this to exist. I think what Adam suggests is valid. Kids are not even allowed to go to school if they're not vaccinated for something like the flu. And you have a massive movement against anti-vaxxers in both state and federal. And now you have this thing that they've deemed a pandemic, probably rightfully so. But you don't think that it's just a few steps away, even if we get past this pandemic where we, flatten the curve, you don't think that it's just a few steps away that there's a unilateral decision that gives the United States government the ability to impose its medical ideology on its citizens? You don't think that's possible?
I think it's I think it's possible, but not probable, because there are too many other safeguards that are put in place.
So on a scale, but wouldn't you agree that this is an unprecedented time where safeguards across all sorts of things, across industries, are being taken down specifically to fight this pandemic? Wouldn't you agree with that?
No, I don't agree with that. For example, they're talking about the use in Italy and other places of a drug which is basically used for malaria. Mm-hmm. It's shown to be very effective.
Right, we're talking about in the U.S.
Against the virus as we know it today. But the medical people here, the FDA, which controls how drugs are used in the United States, there's no way to ensure that that's true, because there are not protocols set up under.
You're talking specifically about one subject, and I'm saying that across the board, there's all sorts of safeguards that they've lifted to make it so that we can mobilize as a country. They talk about it every day. They talk about it.
Context, Josh. Context.
I also don't put a lot of faith in the FDA to begin with, because the FDA allows a lot of things to be unlisted. When these companies are making whatever they're making, whether it be food or
I don't understand. What do you mean context?
Well, if you've lived in other countries and spent any time abroad, listen.
All of us in this room have spent time abroad.
Skepticism. I fully understand your skepticism, but there's always elements of our government from the top down. So federal, state, federal, county, or county, city. There are elements of our governments that clearly need improvement. I'm not saying it's perfect, but I guarantee you, having lived in other countries, actually not visited, but lived in other countries, the reality of it is we have more safeguards in place to make sure that the government is not tyrannical than any other country that I can think of currently.
So first of all, you're instituting what we call a logical fallacy there. The fact that you have lived in other countries versus experienced other countries in a meaningful way is both arbitrary to your experience, and it doesn't change the facts. So first of all, let's leave your experience.
Science ramifications.
Let's leave your experience out of it. Let's leave your experience out of it, and let's just talk about the truth of the situation. That the government has said.
Into it as well.
What does that have to do with it? That doesn't have anything to do with it. Again, your education has nothing to do with the facts. All sorts of people have all sorts of people have all sorts of degrees. It doesn't mean that they know things.
What you're describing are not facts. They're assertions.
No, they are facts. The government has repeatedly worked to get measures out of the way so that they can work more effectively during this time. True or not true?
Not arbitrarily and across the board. Not true.
How can you say that? The government is saying that. They literally every day they have a press conference where they say that. Trump talks about how he's made tremendous efforts to get past these things.
What they've actually said, Josh, is under certain provisions which have been granted by Congress, certain individuals, being the president, has the right to waive regulations which would stand by in the way in an emergency situation.
Okay, so to be clear, what you're saying is to be clear.
For example, let me finish my example so we're clear. The FDA states that a drug cannot be used until it's been approved by the FDA, except for a finite reason. The protocol then to use this malaria drug for something other than malaria, to use it for the current virus, that the protocol has been waived for that, so that doctors can begin to use it and see whether or not it's going to help people that are in dire need.
Right. Okay. So now that you've said all that, to be clear, you're saying that the government, through rightful channels, has waived many protocols that have allowed them, within their authority nonetheless, but have allowed them recently to fight this pandemic the best way that they know how, correct?
Yes.
Okay, so that is exactly, so please listen, that is exactly the assertion that's being made. See, what we're saying is that
You're
a bunch of...
making a broader assertion than is true.
No. You literally just justified the position that we're saying.
No, I don't think so. But let me just finish my clarification with this, Josh. First of all, we're not even close to a martial law.
We're not close to a technical martial law, but it is far more within the realm. It is far more within the realm of possibility than it has ever been in America.
Well, the interesting thing about a government that allows its citizenry to cooperate voluntarily is that when you try to enforce upon people, now remember, keep in mind, Josh, that I was a civil law enforcement officer.
Again, I don't really care about those things. I appreciate your experience. I don't think that it changes the facts of the situation. So let's just let the facts.
You can't. When the government.
Let's just let the facts of the situation stand on their own.
Voluntarily comply, and you have to deal with people who will not comply. You have to have a mechanism to be able to
make it so they don't voluntarily comply.
To catch and deal with those people.
So just to be clear, when the government allows people to voluntarily comply and they don't want to, then the government needs to impose a mechanism that makes it so they can't voluntarily comply. Correct?
No. What the government does is it provides incentives for those who refuse to comply.
Incentives. Now that's how I know that you are an experienced lawman. Incentives? You're even laughing about it.
Well, when I would deal with people, Josh, that were upset because of the penalties and interest that were being attached to their non-compliance, I would point out to them that what we have here is we have an incentive.
Right.
So if you don't like the fact that you're having to have to deal with an incentive, then comply.
Right. So basically,
you're making a choice.
So to be clear, you're saying that the government gives people the right to comply or not comply, but if the individual chooses to not comply, then they'll be forced to comply.
No, they're
given incentive
where they have to choose which is better for them.
Way to toe the company line.
Which is what?
Life is a series of choices.
What are the choices then?
Martial law, or more importantly, a totalitarian government, there is no choice.
Yeah, there is. There's a choice to die. There's a choice to die for your freedom or to not.
Yeah, there is a choice to die, live or die. That's correct.
Okay, so isn't that the same choice that a policeman is giving a guy who's running away from him? Live or die?
No, not necessarily.
A guy who pulls a gun. A guy who pulls a gun on a policeman?
He can comply with the requests of the officer, put the gun down, get on the ground.
Well, that's the same thing.
And put his hands up.
Well, when we say live
and get down on the ground.
But when we say live or die, what we're saying is live by my laws or die, or I'll kill you. So that's the same thing that, I mean, you don't have the right. You didn't have the right to do that as a tax officer, although there were certain people in your agency who certainly did, right?
There's only one group that were allowed to carry.
Cool. So there were certain people in your agency who actually did. So the point I'm making is it's not like I think you're euphemizing it, and I would be,
I'm not.
Okay. I mean, so as long as they don't say it's martial law, as long as they don't say that it's martial law, you'd be fine with it. So if they say that they're going to come into your home and they're going to check to make sure that you comply, that you are vaccinated. Hold on. They're going to check to make sure that you comply, that you're vaccinated with the coronavirus vaccine, and then they're going to say to you that if you don't choose to comply, then they will give you an incentive to comply.
Which is
you wouldn't call that a totalitarian regime?
You are so far out on the.
We're going in circles. We're going in circles, and clearly there's a disagreement.
Under our current system of government. Sorry, this would never happen.
Just to be clear, do you think that any? Do you think that any?
If you think that it could, you're really sorely ignorant of how our government is set up.
Do you think that any government where this has happened ever thought that they would be taken over?
The founders of our country put into place constitutionally certain things to protect us from having a totalitarian government.
Are you afraid of socialism taking over?
We don't want to jump over to another deal.
Are you afraid of socialism taking over?
No, well, I'm not afraid of socialism.
Are you concerned that socialism may take over?
And understand the consequences better than probably 98% of the population.
Sweet. But are you concerned that socialism may take over?
Am I what?
Are you concerned that the snowflakes will elect certain people into government and power that eventually will allow for socialism to take over, and we have to warn against that and be careful with it? Are you concerned about that?
I believe that if certain individuals got into power, that over a 40 to 50 years with no corrective steps, then yes, things could erode towards socialism, and it would destroy the Republic of the United States. Yes,
okay.
I'm aware of that.
Okay.
I'm also aware of the safeguards in place and understand the corrections that were put into place by the founders of this country.
So it would be prudent for us to take into account the possibility that what is happening now, though far from an actual implementation of martial law, could create precedences that within the next several years, maybe even sooner because of the technology that's present, the way we spread information so quickly and so on and so forth, could turn into that very government that we don't want, right? It's possible that it could set precedents.
Well, it's possible. As a theologian, my concern is to understand that some of the changes that we see taking place on a domestic but also an international front give way to an understanding that the God whom we love and serve is in control, and that he has already indicated in Scripture that certain things must take place. So I would be more concerned as a believer, I would be more concerned with the news that has just come out that both Russia and China are cozying up to each other.
Sure.
Because of the coronavirus and because of the worldwide implications in regard to that. Because if you turn to Ezekiel and look at the prophecies in Ezekiel regarding the end times, both of those nations are in league as they move against Israel.
Well,
I'd be more concerned with that.
So we don't know that those nations are Gog and Magog. Right. We don't know that they're the kingdom to the north, but yes, that is something to pay more attention to than little old America, which has no place in the Bible for sure.
That is correct.
But then again, we spend an awful lot of time on Truth Time with Pastor Monty talking about American politics. So let's not be disingenuous here about where our focus should be. I think the fact is that we are talking to the American church right now. Right? As Culture and Sanity, as most of the VRN, we're talking to the American church right now and talking about where we need to be. And we can be it's okay for us to be concerned about how to live life as the American church, knowing that a possibility of our freedom being eroded is imminent. That's okay.
I wouldn't say imminent.
Well, we should always think of it as eminent. If it wasn't eminent, then the founding fathers wouldn't have worked so hard to safeguard it.
My position is, as a believer, first of all, I need to understand that God's word says that my God is in control. So I yield to his sovereignty. Aside from that, I also have personal responsibility. And that personal responsibility is to observe the suggestions, and they are suggestions at this point. Observe the suggestions which are being made.
Because at some point they might not be suggestions, right?
Let's not get back into this circular argument.
They are suggestions.
Hey, let's wrap this up and let's give something to our viewers so they can know that we don't hate each other. You're not here right now, Pastor, so we can't give you a cuddle.
No, we don't hate each other. In fact, we value
social distancing would not allow it.
We value what Pastor Monty has to say greatly, because honestly, we have our finger on the end call button, right? Like if we wanted to, we could end the call, and that would be the end of it.
But I'm not going to censor.
But we're not doing that because we value what Pastor Monty.
I wouldn't do that.
Only if you were being totalitarian,
right?
That's right.
We're not doing that because we value what Pastor Monty has to say. I don't feel like we were able to really get into it because we're arguing about whether it can be gotten into in the first place.
So how do we end this? Let's end this.
Well, let's just assume. Bear with us, Pastor Monty. Let's just assume that Evangeline Lilly is right, and we're facing the possibility of martial law. Then, what is our responsibility to the government and how to act as believers? Like, would it be right for her to, because what she's saying is martial law is imminent, and I don't want to encourage that, and I'm not going to act underneath it. Mm-hmm. Is that the right behavior or mentality to have in a situation where that is true?
Yeah.
Giving
and
her
we don't even know what she believes.
Right,
so.
Giving her the benefit of the doubt in theory. What do you think?
Well, okay. Wow. If you're going to force me into that position,
well, that is for the record.
Romans, the Apostle Paul gives guidance that we are to yield to those people who have been put into authority because God is the one who allows them to be in authority.
Yeah, and that's a very important point to make, especially considering, and people don't think about this, but Romans wasn't written in an American, we're free sense. Romans was written in a martial law state. I mean,
yeah, definitely.
But Paul was a Roman citizen, but it was written to a church that was largely Jewish and largely under control of the Roman government. And there's a reason why the examples he gives are things like, if a Roman citizen wants your, or is it Jesus who said that? But anyway, if a centurion wants your coat, then you have to give it to them.
Our responsibility as believers is to recognize the sovereignty of God. And because to recognize the sovereignty of God, we pray for those who are in authority and that God will be the one to guide them so that his will be done.
Would you say
we are called to obey and to pray for those who are in authority?
Is there a point where it's not appropriate to obey, where Romans 13 takes a back seat? What do you think?
When the authorities go against the word of God.
Or tell you to stop serving God or worshiping God.
Right.
Right. If a totalitarian government or a socialistic government that took over a democratic republic came into being and said that churches were no longer allowed to do this, then that would be an issue.
It's just, I was thinking about it in terms of Kate Brown's statement a couple days ago when I don't have the wording in front of me anymore, but the way she's encouraging you or how she's encouraging the people to go, where to go for their spiritual guidance. I was just thinking about how a small change, like in her wording or whatever, could have been interpreted as where you go for your spiritual guidance isn't necessary, or or like seeking spiritual guidance, cease to speak spiritual guidance would be what we're talking about,
right.
Like, so stop worshiping your God. That would be
I would think
like that.
I think that's the
whenever I listen to people like the young lady that you're discussing right now, or I listen to people like
she's in her 40s,
or other people who have observed.
Not everyone's 100.
I don't listen to what they have to say.
Or you do.
Because I'm an intelligent, informed, thinking individual.
Again, there's a certain irony.
What they have to say, you just take it with however much salt you want.
There's a certain irony to saying that I don't listen to what they have to say because I'm informed.
Yeah, they're not.
Okay.
Okay.
The irony is completely lost on you.
We're going to end the episode. We appreciate you calling in, and I hope your leg's healing and you stay healthy.
It is slowly getting better, yes.
And a little plug. We're looking to see how we can get Truth Time back on the air, even though Pastor Monty can't be with us due to the coronavirus.
Yeah, stinking virus.
Thank you for allowing me to participate with you.
I'm kidding. He doesn't have the coronavirus, guys. He can't move his leg.
It's a bad joke right now.
I know.
All right, Pastor. Love you. See ya.
See ya.
Lord bless you too.
Bye.
Bye.
What I was gonna say there at the end of that was just that I think that we're gonna see more of that regardless. I think that is going to be an outcome. Is that the churches that haven't figured out that they are the church outside of their building are going to sort of, I think people are going to realize that that's not how you got to do. That's the identity of the church is going to alter in this stage. And I think that concept of having religion, but having no power in it, that is talked about in the revelatory books in Scripture is going to be there because of it. It's like, you don't need the church. Like, you can find your spiritual guidance wherever. The church wasn't even able to help you during this time. Yeah,
I was really thinking about, like I said, her statement and how it just a little switch and it could have been whoa, type of thing.
Yeah.
But all right, guys. Well, thanks for tuning in. Those of you that did, I hope that this reaches, more of you. And stay tuned for more content from the Vigilance Radio Network during this interesting time. But we're out for now. See ya.
The views presented in this program are not meant to express the specific views of the S3EP5 Bible Fellowship. You are listening to the Vigilance Radio Network.